Hello and welcome back to the How to Bet podcast here on Brisnet.com. Ed DeRosa, joined by a frequent guest in years past, and Danny Zucker. We welcome you from Predictiform, and after a long layoff for this podcast, we jump right into a very competitive Lecomte field.
It's good to be back. Yeah, quite a long layoff, Ed, but I'm ready to go and look forward to talking horses with you over the course of the Derby run.
Yeah, ready to fire off the layoff for sure. A lot of good 3-year-old races await. We'll also touch on some of the bigger older male races, the Pegasus next week, Big Cat perhaps, etc. But definitely a 3-year-old focus this time of year through the first Saturday in May. And before we jump into the field specifically, just from a handicapping perspective, Danny, just curious your thoughts on what you look for in the PPs. We often hear that these 3-year-olds, it's this time of year where they do jump up lifetime best numbers and really sort of show that they're able to take that next step forward. What are some things you look for that indicate that might be coming, where this is a spot where a horse could jump up, and even though maybe they weren't grade 1 material before, get that says, yeah, I'm on the Derby trail?
From my perspective, I try to key in on the Predictiform numbers and the patterns. The information in the PPs, the ultimate PPs, the other one number of speed figures out there are sort of built into the price. So I think the edge comes from looking at the patterns and the form of these horses as they progress. Even 1 or 2 races, we see big moves by horses, and then trying to understand whether we think a horse is going to be able to break through its lifetime top 2 races in a row, 3 races in a row. There are a couple horses in here that might have a chance at doing that, morning line at 12 and 15 to 1. So for me, what I'm looking for mostly is pattern recognition of a horse that will be able to break through its previous lifetime top and get to a number that I think is fast enough to win a race like this, which is probably going to be on the Predictiform final figure somewhere in the 75 to 77 range, Ed.
All right, and I think as we get in on the points system where we get into the 50 and 100-point races, we'll talk more about this. But, of course, the horsemen looking for that progression, and they want to see their horses mature and improve. But there is always that concern of the dreaded too much too soon, where a big number really could knock you out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you. We tend not to see those big number knockouts until a little bit later in the 3-year-old year. So something maybe like Louisiana Derby or some of the other races coming up in March and April, you'll see knockout numbers. There's a handful of horses in here that look like they're going to run through their lifetime tops on Saturday. And trying to identify which one has the most value is what we'll talk about. It's not who's the most likely to do it, but who's the most likely to do it at the longest price.
Yeah, agree with you there 100%. And well, I guess without further ado, we should get into it. There are 14 horses expected, would be the first 14-horse field, I think, in the history of fairgrounds at 1 mile and 70 yards. So kudos to the racing department. And a lot of times we can touch on a horse and it's a pretty quick study. It's a pass, but even the 20 and 30 to 1 morning line horses in here, I thought had some intrigue at that big of a price. And we do start with Wicked Indeed, number 1 down on the rail. One of Steve Asmussen's 2. I prefer his other, which we'll get to later, but would you make a Wicked Indeed?
So we have to start by eliminating some horses, and I think Wicked Indeed, his first 2 races of his lifetime, his final figure, his 4 furlong figures, these inter-race figures, they all look to be a little slow as compared to the rest of the field. I'm going to toss Wicked Indeed.
All right, yeah, I'm with you, especially at 12 to 1. There's just some others in here at much bigger prices that just look to have more of an advantage. And Steve Asmussen and Brian Hernandez and Winchell Thoroughbreds, all connections that deserve respect, and with that usually comes money as well. And just this one just has the look of a mid-pack runner who's not going to pass many horses. So I'm with you. We move on to a horse whose name I probably should have worked better at learning to pronounce, Malpius, number 2. Malpus, yeah. One I clearly didn't put a lot of time into. For me, just another one of those mid-pack types at 12-1 that doesn't excite me. What do you think of this one?
So I took a long, hard look at this runner, and the first thing I did is I went back to the Brisnet. I like the pedigrees offered at Brisnet because you can go back and you can take a look and see if the breeders wind up sticking with other horses. So the breeder of this horse actually owns this horse. So I went back and I looked at the other sibs of Malpass, and I noticed that the breeders didn't own any of those horses. So when a breeder sticks with a runner, it shows confidence. The thing that I found to be interesting about Malpass is his 2 races thus far have negative patterns, right? So they're negative patterns, but he's broken through tops for 4 furlongs, for 2 furlongs, for 4 furlongs, and final figure, running negative patterns. So first look, if you're a predictive form subscriber, you would see 2 negative patterns and you would think, well, the horse is going to run a negative pattern again. This is one of those cases, Ed, where a negative pattern, a couple negative patterns back to back could lead to a massive lifetime top. So Malpass looks to be the speed. His 2 furlong figure is much faster than any of these in here. So let's say Malpass is going to get the lead, and I think get the lead pretty easily through 2 furlongs and 4 furlongs. Now it's going to come down to whether or not the horse has the stamina to deal with this really long stretch at fairgrounds. At a price of 12 or 15-1, he's got a pretty good trainer. As I mentioned, the breeders own the horse. I think Malpass is going to run a lifetime number. I don't know if the lifetime number is going to be the best in here, but I think he's going to be a speedball and someone to consider for sure for me.
All right, and he is a major pace threat, as you noted, with that 2 furlong figure, and the Brisnet pace ratings back that up as well. So being that he didn't actually make the lead in either of his races, but stretching out here and being drawn inside, hard to think he's probably anything more than a length off the lead, if not on the engine from post 2. And there we'll get to later, but a couple horses I do like. Drawn on the outside are going to have to go as well. So that was one of my concerns with him, is how much pressure he's going to get up top. But maybe one, if the Lecomte isn't the day, if he cuts back from the mount 70 back to a sprint, could be dangerous. So I'm more inclined to watch, but certainly respect what you said about his early foot.
For sure.
Number 3 is Tackett, who, for me, gets into one of my top contenders. Probably would like a little higher than 6-1, given the full field. Maybe we'll get it, because I think a couple others in here are going to take a little more money than the morning line odds maker thought. This is one of those. I mean, you talk about a horse who needs to improve off his best so far. He definitely fits that bill for me. 88 speed rating on Briss is his lifetime top. That's not going to get it done here, but I see some things at this distance and with a lot of pace in front of him that make me think Joe Bravo can work out a trip with this West Virginia bred. What do you think?
Yeah, from purely a figure perspective, he looks to be a little bit too slow in here. Very similar number to the horse we just talked about, the 2. I think there's more value in the 2. And a bit more of a chance of the 2 popping up. I also agree with you, Ed, that 6-1 is a little light for this kind of a runner. I wouldn't be terribly surprised to see him win, but I'm not going to include him in my top couple.
All right. To the outside, our first, our first sort of pattern designation on the positive side as we work through the field, Mr. Money. Has had a pattern notation in all 4 of his career starts, and second with his second new pace top in his 4th start, which was the Breeders'. Maybe a buried race for this one. 4th, beat 9.5. Obviously, no game winners in this race, and he's definitely turned some heads. One of my colleagues likes Mr. Money a lot, Scott Shapiro. Another one of those we're 5-1. I'm just not sold at that short of a price, but certainly has flashed some talent.
Sure, and I think by post time you're looking at potentially the favorite here. Four positive patterns: compression line, a new pace top, a reversal, and another new pace top. The horse looks like he's trying and figuring out how to run and how to improve. Looks to be potentially situated in a good spot from a pace perspective. Figures 74 gets him forward moving towards the 75 or 76 that I think is going to take to win it. But I'm a little disenfranchised by the price. 4-1, maybe 9-2 post time. I also don't know what to do with the last race at Breeder, in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, how that's going to impact the horse. So I would say 2 years ago, I'd look at the patterns and be like, yeah, I really like this horse. He's got all positive patterns. But my sense is that the value is not going to be here with Mr. Money. I think he's going to get bet, and probably has as good a chance to win as any. If he's got, let's say, Ed, he's got a 15% chance to win this race, 12 to 15% chance to win the race, you're not going to get your value that you should be at 6 or 7-1.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely agree with that. And always, to me, that's the right way to look at a race. Most likely winner is good to have in your head, but also how that squares up with the odds is way more important when it comes to making money long term. From maybe the potential favorite to probably one of the longer priced horses, Night Ops. $5,000 buy for trainer Keith DeSormo, a trainer who's made a name for himself with some of these smart buys. Lifetime best on Brisnet last out in the sealed slop, going 1 1/8 off the turf at Churchill, and actually didn't break his maiden, but it was his top speed rating. He is a maiden coming into here. A big price for a reason, Danny, and one that maybe picks up some pieces late, but I do prefer even other long shots.
Yeah, I would agree. From a figure perspective, looks to be too slow in here. If you're planning on going 4 deep in a superfecta and a 14-horse field, maybe use Night Ops for 4th. But I can't see Night Ops from our POV in the top 3.
No, there is enough speed where you say, well, if they're running late, maybe this is the one. And, they're expecting rain as well. And his best race came in the mud, and the sire's 16% mud. So maybe that's a move up. But, yeah, on the win end, even at the price, just would prefer others at bigger prices. Not quite that big a price, but a double-digit odd on the morning line, and think might actually end up taking a little more money than 12-1. But Hog Creek Hustle, who I actually liked in that Sugar Bowl, and I've talked to some people who are familiar with the Vicky Foley Barn, play Fairgrounds a lot. They think this one is a sprinter overall. Maybe a middle distance type. I'm not sold that 6 furlongs was this one's best distance. Maybe a 1:70 stretching Hog Creek Hustle, but has run some consistently good races. 3 of his 4 career starts have been okay. Gets Florent Giroux. I don't mind Hog Creek Hustle, and certainly will have some pace to run at, Danny.
Yeah, the one thing I can note about Hog Street Hustle is I looked into, again, I'll go back to the Brisnet pedigree pages, looked at Majestic Dunhill, which is a half to Hog Street Hustle. It looked like the horse improved going longer distances. So you have somebody in the family that showed the ability to get better through longer distances, which would be my concern with Hog Creek Hustle. So that neutralized the major concern I had about distance. From a figure perspective, this is the kind of horse that runs negative pattern, positive pattern, negative pattern, positive pattern, all while improving and regressing the way a 3-year-old should. So I do expect Hog Creek Hustle to run a better figure than last out, which was a 74, could be a 75, 76. He would be maybe a 3rd or 4th choice in here for me, Ed, but somebody will definitely be using.
All right, yeah, with you, this does conclude an all stakes guaranteed pick 4. So the 14 horse field, even having a 12-1 morning line on the ticket and getting live to could be potentially lucrative. And I'm with you. He's definitely one that I could see figuring on all tickets to me to get live to. One of the enigmas for me is to his outside, number 7, trainer Tom Amos adding the blinkers, which I think is interesting. Successful appeal out of a Congaree mare, so not sure what to make of the breeding for the distance, although he did win at a mile and the 16th at Churchill, so see that as a positive. Gets James Graham, who's had a good meet at Fairground so far, so some things to like. But like Tackett, who I do like as well, down inside, does need to improve, at least on the Brisnet scale. 88 speed rating, his top. Going to take at least a 90 to win this, I think. But maybe Amos and the blinkers, he knows how to improve horses, and this could be the time for Roland.
Yeah, he certainly does. And back-to-back, 71.5, 72 final figures, a couple positive pattern, a couple negative patterns, a positive pattern, been around this kind of a distance. It's hard to imagine that you might get 12-1 on this horse, Ed. I suspect it would be less than that. Again, probably a game time decision as to whether to use him or not. I would give Roland, this horse, something like a high single-digit chance to win it, let's say 8-9% chance to win the race. I'd have to look at the board and see if the value is going to be there. For me, purely from a figure standpoint, I would take a pass because Roland looks too slow.
All right. Well, we'll see what the price gives on him. Another one that's sort of an enigma to me is War of Will by Warfront, out of a Sadler's Wells mare, cost about $300,000 and made his first 4 career starts on turf, including the Breeders' Cup Juvenile turf as a maiden, before switching over to dirt and catching a sloppy track at Churchill and winning by 5 in what was clearly the best race of his career. So if you believe that this completely turf pedigree horse that started on turf might actually be a dirt horse, that number is really hard to ignore. At the price, though, I'm inclined to say, look, it was a sealed sloppy track. That maiden race hasn't come back necessarily strong either. He can beat me, but is I absolutely think he'll be one of the top 3 choices in the bet. I'm inclined to let him beat me, I guess.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 3 out of the 5 races he's run underneath a 70. The 2 races he's run 73 and 74, albeit 1 on turf. Really, you're betting that the horse improves off just 1 race, like you said. And I think for me, there will be a lot of money bet on War of Will out of Warfront. That's going to attract a lot of money, and I'm just not sure the value is there. Again, I wouldn't give War of Will more than a 10% chance to win. Even if you build in the takeout, you've got to get 8 or 9-1 for this horse to have any value, Ed. And like you said, as a third choice at 5 or 6-1, he's a pass.
All right. One horse who might live up to his name, or you're at least hoping does, if you bet him at 20-1 morning line, is Mo Speed, who needs to show Mo Speed. I would say from a pace standpoint, that might be, if you like stalkers and do a fast pace, have a chance to get first run. He's somewhat interesting, but big improvement needed on paper.
You love to see a $500,000 purchase at 20-1 morning line. Figures are really, really slow, really slow here as compared to the rest of the field. Last race is the 68, would have to improve 7 points. And while it's not impossible, I think there are others that have a better chance to get to the number. He would be a pass.
Yeah. To his outside is Chase the Ghost. And when looking at this race from a standpoint of who do I think maybe we're talking about in 2, 3, 4 months as the races get longer and the trail winds into the Triple Crown itself, Chase the Ghost fits that bill somewhat for me. I don't love horses who need 2 turns to break their maiden, but it is Dallas Stewart and sort of his MO. He doesn't fire really first out. I kind of would have thought maybe shipping to Indiana Grand could have woken was runner-up that day, and then finally won second start at the fairgrounds. But a lot of these pedigrees, to me, Danny, are middle distances at best. This one's by Go Sapper out of a Holy Bull mare, so should be no concern for 1.25 miles. And we've seen Dallas train, Golden Soul, Commanding Curve, these who performed well on Derby Day, closing into the pace. Chase the Ghost sort of has that feel for me. I don't think Lecomte is the day, but I am eager to see how he runs. And if he's mid-pack and shows some foot, maybe we get a price on Risen Star or Louisiana Derby and take a shot then. But I'm inclined to more watch what could be in store down the road than short term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with you here. Purely from a final figure perspective, he hasn't popped 70 yet. He hasn't broke 70. So here he's got to break through a 70 threshold, and then he's got to move forward 5 points from that. I don't see it happening. I think this is going to be an improvement for him, possibly to hit the board in third or fourth, but absolutely no chance I'm betting this horse in the top two.
Number 11, Tight 10, I am interested in somewhat, and I don't think 8-1 is terrible. Breeders' Cup Juvenile trouble with the rail, and I just did not run his race. His previous 3 races was all either on the pace or close to the pace, and was never in it in the Breeders' Cup. From an outside post, he's going to have to go, but Ricardo Santana certainly knows his way around fairgrounds, and Steve Asmussen trainees. So Tight 10 for me, looking at, even though there is a lot of pace in here, he is one of the more forwardly placed types that I do think has a chance to lead them all the way or close to it. What do you make a Tight 10?
Hold on a sec. So the horse hit the rail, but let's dismiss hitting the rail and just look at the figures before that. 71, 71, 73.5. So all forward moves. You can see they took a shot at the Breeders' Cup, hit the rail, regressed. What do you want? There's nothing you can do about it. If you were to scratch that race out and imagine where Tight 10 might run, I think a 74 or 75 could be in store for him. I don't think he's good enough to win, Ed. I don't. And I think, again, in a big field like this with a horse that's, say, got a 10% chance of winning, are you going to get 10 or 11-1 or 12-1 that you need to get with the takeout? Unlikely. So, sure, the horse has got a shot to win. From a value perspective, he wouldn't be in my top 2.
All right. Well, 8-1 is my floor. I mean, that is what I want, and I'll probably try to lock it in the pick 4. I will say I'm a little concerned. I mean, he was 3-2 in the Saratoga Special, and then he was the 11-10 favorite in the Iroquois. And ran okay, a couple runner-up efforts, but it does seem like if you really wanted to sink your teeth into Tight 10, you probably should have won one of those and didn't. So some red flags, but if the price compensates where it is now, I'll take it. Any lower, probably go elsewhere. And feel even more strongly about Plus K Parfait, number 12 to his outside. Morning line favorite at 9-2. I could see War of Will or Mr. Money actually being the favorite, but it's going to be one of those 3 for sure. And I'm willing to play against all 3 in such a deep competitive field. And sometimes they win, but like we said, if the price isn't compensating you got to be willing to play against underlays. And I just think this one's going to take too much money off a running line that looks more impressive than it probably was.
And speaking of the running line, and I went back, I watched the Kentucky Jockey Club like 5 times just to make sure I was seeing it clearly. I feel like this horse was no worse than 6th the entire race. And the PPs have him as, 11th at the first call, 8th at the second call. And I think it was more like, 6th or 7th at the first call and 4th at the second call. So to me, he looks to be more forwardly placed than he's getting an indication. So a trip handicapper looking at the PPs are going to see a field with a fair amount of speed. What you would think as well, it looks like Plus K Parfait has changed his running style to come off the pace. I think he's going to improve coming off the pace. I like this. in a pace meltdown kind of a race, and so I'm going to go with plus K Parfait. I happen to think that's not going to be the way it's going to go. I think the horse is going to be on the forward, moving forward early. I think the 11 is going to cause problems inside. He's going to be pushed wide all along, while the 2 is going to be skimming the rail and just have a real advantage on the front end over both, a couple of these outside horses. I agree with you that you're looking at the morning line favorite. So from an odds perspective at 9-2, and let's say we get 9-2 on the horse, right, Ed? Does the horse have a 25% chance to win this race with the takeout, or a 20% to win the 20% chance to win this race with takeout? I think really unlikely. There's not going to be much value here. And while he's somebody I can imagine using, if I'm making one straight win bet, it's not going to be on the 12.
All right. For me, neither, certainly. I would maybe consider a win bet on the next horse we'll talk about, number 13, Maniwa. It has the fastest Brisnet speed rating in the field anyway, albeit that was 6 furlongs in defeat in the Sugar Bowl. Another one of those that really looks like more middle distance type. I'm sure will be nominated to the Triple Crown, but will take charge out of a Proud Citizen mare. Just hard to see how much further this one wants to go, but consistent sort, has run a bunch for Wayne Catalano, and we'll have to work out a trip from the outside, but I do think 10-1 is a fair price on him.
Yeah, I would agree. The last race is the fastest race in here, so that last race is a 76. Prior to that, it's a new pace top, 74.2. 1, 2, 3, 6 out of 7 races have been over 70, where a handful of these haven't even run 70 yet. Looks to be battle tested a little bit. I really do like this Will Take Charge. It's a great racehorse, really game. I think a quality sire. Not thrilled with the outside post, but I can see if, as you said, if the jockey can work out a trip from the 13 and deal with some inside speed, there's value there. So, yeah, very, very interesting horse to look at.
Number 14, Admire, is going to scratch because of the outside post. Have not heard for sure if Bernie Flint is going to run West Texas then. But I do want to mention him because off the AE in a 20-1 morning line, not the worst long shot in this bunch for me, Danny. Needed a 30 claimer to break the maiden. Did so on debut. Blitzed him, winning by 7 lengths. And I also want to point out he's by Flat Out, who is a 22% mud sire. So if the rains do come, West Texas, for me, off his debut, it's a lot to ask. But at that price, I might have to just take a look at how I can make some money if he happens to crash the number.
Yeah, for my take, I hope he doesn't get in, because he would cause a nuisance for probably the horse I'm looking at as my top choice. In any case, a negative pattern, 69 from the far outside with speed. I think it's going to be a difficult position to come from. And overall, it's going to be, I think people are going to look at this race and see a number of speed horses and think, well, this is going to be a contested pace up front. From my eyes, and if I just were to look at the 2 furlong figure numbers of the horses that have qualified for this kind of perspective, I think the 2 is definitely the fastest in here, like by 2 lengths to the quarter and by like 2 lengths to the half. Whether or not the horse can rate, whether or not the horse can deal with, the second longest stretch and racing right behind Los Al, I don't know. But certainly for value and having a horse on top that's got a hold versus somebody coming from behind, I like the 2 as my top choice. My second choice would wind up being the 6, Hog Creek Hustle. If I'm going to have one horse coming from the front and one horse coming from behind, the way I'll bet the race in multiples is to look at Hog Creek Hustle as another that could, potentially win if there's a meltdown up front. So I want one horse on the lead. I want one horse coming from the back of the pack. They're both 12-1, and those will be the 2 I'm using in multiple race exotics. I'm not probably going to play exactas or triples here, trifectas, because anybody can finish second or third in this field, and you'd have to go very deep. And with 14 horses, if you try to do an all bet, you're going to go broke pretty quick.
Right. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective because, as we said, I mean, even a horse like Night Ops, yeah, he's 30-1. He's a maiden, but I mean, he's going to be running late, and not like you're playing him to win to think he can hook up for third and fourth, and it gets pretty expensive. And on the flip side of that, just a horse, that I obviously like a little more than you, but West Texas, yeah, I mean, a win threat, okay, I can understand definitely poo-pooing that, but we've definitely seen at fairgrounds, even with the long stretch, these big prices, they can tend to hang around, especially in a big field where if other horses are backing through and a lot of trouble for closers, and he hangs on for third because the rest are terrible. So with you, pretty tough to get too involved vertically, if you're not willing to use a bunch or narrow in certain slots and be right about the ones you like. But for me to out the pick four, I definitely want Tackett, Maniwa at 10-1 for sure. But yeah, tough race to kick off, and glad you landed on a couple prices because it's that type of race for me.
Yeah, and Maniwa would be my third choice. Possibly if I were to go three deep, I would use Maniwa. But even if you sometimes I like to play like a 3x3, or I'm sorry, a 3x4 by all. A 3x4 by all in a 12-horse field's $144, Ed. And
right.
That's just a really big swing. Even if you play it for 50 cents, that's just a big swing to take. In a wide open race like this, right? You could have an 8-1 to win it, and you could miss out second. And so it seems to me the best way to attack these big fields is in multiple race exotics.
All right, I like it. Well, there are it's a guaranteed pick four. It ends in race 12, and then there's the late pick four that ends in race 14. So 2 chances to connect in a pick four plus rolling pick threes. So a lot of great wagering at fairgrounds and really all year. And good to get back in the swing with you. And we'll go. We'll take a look at the Pegasus next week.
All right, sounds good. Look forward to it, man. See you.
All right, thank you, Danny Zucker, everyone from predictiveform.com. You can go. Numbers for all races and powered by Brisnet, which we like, and look forward to talking Pegasus. But in the meantime, we have the Lecomte this week. Appreciate Danny's thoughts. Good luck.